Baby found a German shepherd falling from cliff edge. What the baby did next left everyone in tears. What happened next will shock you. The story you are about to listen to will leave you speechless. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from. The fog rolled thick across Ocean View Cliff, like a gray blanket trying to hide something terrible. Rain had been falling all afternoon, turning the narrow mountain road into a slick ribbon of danger. The wind whistled through the sparse bushes clinging to the rocky ledge, carrying with it the salty smell of the ocean far below and something else, something that made the air feel heavy with fear. In the passenger seat of a worn blue pickup truck, 5-year-old Alex clutched his bright red scarf against his chest. His small fingers wound the soft fabric around and around as he pressed his face to the cold window glass. His father, David, gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual, squinting through the windshield wipers that squeaked with each pass. "Almost home, buddy," David said, his voice strained. The radio crackled with weather warnings, but he switched it off. The last thing he wanted was more bad news today. They had spent the afternoon at his mother's house sorting through old photo albums, pictures of Alex's mom who had died 2 years ago. It always left them both feeling empty and quiet. Alex didn't respond. His brown eyes were fixed on something outside, something that made his small body tense up like a coiled spring. Through the swirling mist, a shadow moved near the cliff's edge. At first, it looked like a large rock or fallen branch, but then it shifted. "Dad," Alex whispered, his breath fogging the window. "Stop the truck." "What's wrong?" David glanced sideways, but kept driving. They were still 20 minutes from home, and the weather was getting worse by the minute. "There's something out there." Alex's voice was barely audible over the wind. "Something alive." David slowed the truck and peered through the passenger window. The fog parted for just a moment, like curtains being pulled back on a stage. What he saw made his heart stop. A large German shepherd was sliding backward on the loose shale near the cliff's edge. The dog's back legs were tangled in what looked like a frayed rope or leash, and with each gust of wind, more rocks crumbled away beneath its paws. The animal's golden-brown coat was soaked and matted, and its eyes were wild with terror. "Oh my God," David breathed, pulling the truck to the side of the narrow road. The engine sputtered to a stop. The dog looked directly at them through the mist, and then something impossible happened. The animal opened its mouth and made a sound that was almost human, a whimper that sounded exactly like Alex. Alex's scarf fell from his hands. His small face went pale as paper. "Dad, did you hear that?" David's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. He had heard it too, but it was impossible. Dogs didn't call people by name. Dogs didn't know names they'd never been taught. Yet there was no mistaking what they had both heard. "It's too dangerous," David said, more to himself than to Alex. The cliff edge was crumbling, the rain was making everything slippery, and he had no idea how stable the ground was. He couldn't risk Alex losing another parent. He just couldn't. But Alex was already reaching for his seatbelt buckle with trembling fingers. "We have to help her, Dad. She's scared." "Alex, no." David's voice was firm, but his son had already clicked the seatbelt free. "She knows my name," Alex said, and there were tears in his voice. "How does she know my name?" Before David could stop him, Alex had opened the passenger door. The wind immediately grabbed at his hair and clothes, and the sound of the ocean crashing against the rocks hundreds of feet below filled the truck cab. "Alex!" David lunged across the seat, but his son was already outside, standing in the cold rain. The German shepherd slipped another few inches backward. A shower of small rocks fell into the void, and the dog's claws scraped desperately against the wet stone. The rope around its back legs was pulling tight, and David could see now that it wasn't just a leash. It was attached to something heavy hidden in the mist below. Alex took a step toward the cliff edge, and David's world narrowed to a single point of terror. He threw himself out of the driver's side door and ran around the truck. "Don't move another step," he commanded, but his voice cracked. Alex looked back at his father with eyes that seemed far too old for his 5-year-old face. "She's going to fall, Dad, and she called my name. That means something." David knelt beside his son, rain running down his face like tears. The dog was maybe 30 feet away, but those 30 feet were a death trap of loose rocks and crumbling earth. One wrong step, and they would all go over the edge. "Listen to me," David said, putting his hands on Alex's small shoulders. "I know you want to help, I know it seems like she called your name, but we don't have any rope, we don't have any equipment, and I can't lose you too." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of grief they had both been carrying. Alex's mother had died in a car accident on a road just like this one, slippery, dangerous, claiming lives when people took risks they shouldn't have taken. But the dog whimpered again, and this time there was no mistaking it. "Alex, help!" Father and son stared at each other in the rain. The impossible had just become undeniable. Alex reached up and untied his red scarf from around his neck. The fabric was soft and strong. His mother had made it for him the Christmas before she died. It was the one thing of hers he carried everywhere. "I have an idea," he said, his small voice steady despite the wind and rain. "But you have to trust me." David wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed at him to grab his son and run back to the truck, but something in Alex's eyes stopped him, a determination that reminded him so much of his wife, it took his breath away. "What's your plan?" David heard himself asking. Alex held up the red scarf. "Mom's scarf is strong. Remember when you used it to pull the Christmas tree out of the truck? It didn't even stretch." David did remember. The scarf had surprised him with how tough it was, despite looking delicate. But using it to rescue a full-grown German shepherd from a cliff edge? "Alex, that's not going to be strong enough to—" "Not by itself," Alex interrupted. "But if you hold my ankles and I crawl out there, I can wrap the scarf around her chest like a harness. Then we both pull." The plan was crazy. It was dangerous. It violated every safety rule David had ever learned. But looking at the dog sliding slowly toward death and seeing the fierce love in his son's eyes, David realized that sometimes crazy was the only option that made sense. "If I let you do this," David said carefully, "you do exactly what I say when I say it. No arguments." Alex nodded solemnly. "And if I tell you to stop, we stop. No matter what happens to the dog." Alex hesitated, then nodded again. David looked out at the German shepherd, who was now hanging halfway over the cliff edge, held only by the tangled rope around its legs. The animal's breathing was fast and shallow, and its eyes were glazing over with exhaustion. "Okay," David said, the word tasting like fear in his mouth, "but we do this my way." Alex dropped to his belly on the wet rocks without another word. David grabbed his son's ankles with both hands, feeling how small and fragile they were in his grip. The boy began to crawl forward, inch by careful inch. The red scarf clutched in one hand. The rocks were slippery and unstable. Every time Alex moved, small stones shifted and rolled toward the edge. David could hear them bouncing off the cliff face as they fell, the sound getting fainter and fainter until it disappeared entirely. "Easy," David whispered. "Nice and slow." Alex was halfway to the dog when the ground beneath David's knees began to crack. A spiderweb of fractures spread out from where he was lying, and he realized with horror that the entire edge of the cliff was more unstable than he had thought. "Alex, stop," he called out. But Alex had already reached the German shepherd. The dog lifted its head and looked directly into the boy's eyes. Up close, David could see that the animal was younger than he had thought. Probably not much more than a puppy, despite its size. Its fur was not just wet from the rain, but also dirty, as if it had been living rough for a long time. "Hey girl," Alex said softly, his voice somehow carrying over the wind. "I'm going to help you, okay? But you have to stay very still." The dog stopped struggling. Its eyes never left Alex's face as the boy carefully looped the red scarf. Under its front legs and around its chest, the fabric was just long enough to create a makeshift harness. "Got it, Dad," Alex called back. "But there's something else." "What?" David's arms were starting to shake from holding his son's weight and fighting the urge to pull him back to safety immediately. "The rope around her legs isn't just tangled," Alex said, his voice tight with concentration. "It's attached to something heavy, like someone tied her to a weight and threw her over." David's blood ran cold. This wasn't an accident. Someone had tried to kill this dog by dragging it over the cliff edge. But why? And how had it survived? "Can you untie it?" David asked. Alex worked at the knots with one hand while keeping the other wrapped around the scarf. The dog remained perfectly still, as if it understood that any movement could send them all tumbling into the void. "It's too tight," Alex said finally, "but I think I can slip the rope off if we lift her up a little." That's when they heard the footsteps. Someone was running toward them through the fog, feet splashing in puddles and sliding on wet rocks. David's first thought was relief. Help was coming. His second thought was terror. What if whoever was approaching was the same person who had tried to kill the dog? "David, is that you?" A woman's voice called out through the mist. David recognized the voice and nearly sobbed with relief. It was Sarah, their neighbor who lived a mile down the mountain road. She was a marathon runner who jogged past their house every evening, rain or shine. "Sarah, over here!" David shouted back. She appeared out of the fog like a guardian angel, her running shoes splashing through puddles as she took in the scene. Her eyes went wide when she saw Alex hanging halfway over the cliff edge. "What can I do?" she asked without hesitation. "I need another anchor point," David said through gritted teeth. His grip on Alex's ankles was starting to slip from the rain and sweat. "Can you grab onto me?" Sarah immediately dropped to her knees behind David and wrapped her arms around his waist. The extra stability was exactly what they needed. "Okay, Alex," David called out. "Try to slip that rope off her legs." Alex worked at the rope while keeping the scarf secure around the dog's chest. The German Shepherd seemed to understand what was happening and tried to help by lifting one paw at a time. "Almost got it," Alex said. "Just one more." The rope came free with a wet slithering sound, and something heavy splashed into the ocean far below. The dog was no longer anchored to whatever weight had been dragging it down, but it was still dangling over the edge, held only by a 5-year-old boy and a homemade scarf. "Now what?" Sarah asked, her voice strained from holding David's weight. "Now we pull," David said. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. All 3 of them pulled backward with everything they had. The dog came up and over the edge in a rush, landing in a heap on the wet rocks. Alex scrambled backward on his elbows until he was safely away from the cliff, the red scarf still wrapped around the German Shepherd's chest. For a moment, nobody moved. They all lay on the ground, breathing heavily and staring at each other through the rain. The dog was the first to move, crawling over to Alex and pressing its wet nose against his cheek. "You're okay," Alex whispered, wrapping his arms around the animal's neck. "You're safe now." The dog licked his face once, then did something that made David's heart skip a beat. It positioned itself between Alex and the cliff edge, its body trembling but protective, as if it was determined to make sure the boy who had saved it would never be in danger again. Sarah helped David to his feet, and they both stared down at the boy and the dog. The red scarf was still tied around the German Shepherd's chest, and something about the sight of it made David's throat tight with emotion. "She protected me," Alex said, looking up at his father with wonder in his eyes. "Even after I saved her, she's protecting me." David knelt down beside his son and gently untied the scarf from around the dog's chest. The animal didn't resist, but its eyes never left Alex's face. "What are we going to do with her?" Sarah asked. David looked at the German Shepherd, at its intelligent eyes, its protective posture, and the way it had somehow known his son's name. He thought about the rope that had been tied around its legs, the weight that had nearly dragged it to its death, and the mystery of how it had ended up on this cliff in the first place. "First," he said, "we get her warm and dry. Then we figure out who tried to kill her, and why." As if the dog understood his words, it whimpered softly and pressed closer to Alex. The boy gently stroked its wet fur and whispered, "I'm going to call you Luna, because you appeared in the mist like the moon coming out of the clouds." David smiled despite everything. It was the first time he had seen his son truly happy since his mother's death. Maybe saving this dog had saved Alex too, in a way that had nothing to do with the cliff edge and everything to do with having something to love and protect. But as they helped Luna to her feet and started walking back toward the truck, David couldn't shake the feeling that their troubles were just beginning. Someone had tried to kill this dog, and now that dog was calling his son by name. Nothing about this was normal. Nothing about this was safe. And yet, looking at Alex's face as he walked beside Luna through the rain, David realized that maybe normal wasn't what they needed right now. Maybe what they needed was something extraordinary, something that would change their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The fog was starting to lift as they reached the truck, but the mystery was only getting deeper. The drive home was quiet except for the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers and Luna's soft panting from the back seat. Alex had insisted the dog sit beside him, and David hadn't had the heart to argue. The boy kept one hand gently resting on Luna's head while staring out the window at the darkening sky. David's mind was racing with questions he couldn't answer. How had Luna known Alex's name? Who had tried to kill her, and why? And most importantly, what did this mean for his family's safety? He glanced in the rearview mirror at his son and the German Shepherd, and his chest tightened with a mixture of love and fear. When they pulled into the gravel driveway of their small wooden house, Luna immediately became alert. Her ears perked up, and she began sniffing the air through the slightly open window. David noticed her body tense, and he wondered if she was remembering something, or sensing danger. "Easy, girl," Alex whispered, stroking her fur. "This is home now." The word home seemed to calm Luna, and she relaxed against Alex's side, but David noticed that her eyes continued to scan their surroundings as they got out of the truck. It was the behavior of an animal that had learned to be constantly watchful, constantly afraid. Inside the house, David realized they had a problem. It was nearly 8 o'clock at night, and the only veterinary clinic in their small mountain town closed at 6. The nearest 24-hour animal hospital was over an hour away through winding mountain roads that were dangerous even in good weather. "Is she hurt bad, Dad?" Alex asked, kneeling beside Luna near the fireplace. The dog was shivering despite being inside, and David could see scratches and cuts on her legs from the rocks. "I don't think so," David said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "But we need to get her checked out by a professional." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Dr. Maya Singh, the local veterinarian. Maya had been a friend of Alex's mother, and she had always told David to call her anytime, day or night, if there was an emergency with animals. The phone rang 3 times before Maya's tired voice answered. "Hello? Maya, it's David. I'm sorry to call so late, but we have a situation." "David? Is everything okay? Is Alex hurt?" "Alex is fine, but we found a German Shepherd that was nearly killed tonight. Someone tied a weight to her and tried to throw her off Ocean View Cliff. She's alive, but she's in rough shape." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Maya spoke again, her voice was sharp with concern. "Someone tried to kill a dog by throwing it off the cliff? That's horrible and illegal. Have you called the police?" David looked at Alex, who was now lying on the floor beside Luna, with his head pillowed on her side. The dog's breathing had evened out, and she seemed to be falling asleep. "Not yet," David admitted. "I wanted to make sure she was okay first. Can you talk me through checking her over?" "Of course. But David, if someone deliberately tried to kill this animal, you need to report it. This isn't just animal cruelty. It suggests someone very dangerous is in your area." Maya's words sent a chill down David's spine, but he pushed the fear aside and focused on Luna. Following Maya's instructions over the phone, he carefully examined the dog from nose to tail. Her breathing was steady, her gums were pink, and though she had some cuts and bruises, nothing seemed to be broken. "She's dehydrated," Maya said after David described Luna's condition, "and probably in shock. Do you have any chicken broth? Low sodium if possible." David rummaged through the kitchen cabinets while Alex stayed with Luna. The dog had opened her eyes when David moved away, and she tracked his movements around the house with an alertness that seemed almost human. "Found some," David called back to Maya, holding up a carton of organic chicken broth. "Good. Warm it up just slightly. Body temperature, no hotter. See if she'll drink it. If she won't take it from a bowl, try offering it from your hand or a spoon." David heated the broth and brought it back to the living room. Luna lifted her head when she smelled it, but when he placed the bowl in front of her, she just stared at it without moving. "She won't drink," David reported to Maya. "That's not unusual for a traumatized animal. Sometimes they need to feel completely safe before they'll eat or drink. Have Alex try offering it." Alex dipped his fingers in the warm broth and held them out to Luna. The dog sniffed his hand, then very gently licked the broth from his fingers. It was the first food or water she had taken since they found her. "She's drinking from Alex's hand," David told Maya, and he could hear the relief in his own voice. "That's a very good sign. It means she trusts him. Keep offering small amounts every few minutes. And David, there's something else you need to know." David's stomach clenched. "What?" "I've been seeing an unusual pattern lately. 3 German Shepherds have gone missing from the area in the past 2 months. All of them were young, healthy, and well-trained. The owners thought they were stolen, but the police didn't have enough evidence to investigate properly." "You think Luna is one of the missing dogs?" "It's possible, but if she is, then whoever took her didn't just steal her. They tried to murder her when they were done with whatever they were using her for. That suggests something much more serious than simple theft. David watched Alex continue to feed Luna broth from his hands, and a terrible thought occurred to him. Maya, how would a stolen dog know my son's name? There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. When Maya spoke again, her voice was very quiet. I don't know, David, but I think you need to call the police tonight, and I think you need to be very careful. After hanging up with Maya, David stood in his living room and tried to process everything that had happened. A few hours ago, he and Alex had been driving home from a quiet afternoon with family. Now they had a mysterious dog who somehow knew his son's name. Someone had tried to commit murder, and there was a pattern of missing animals that suggested something much darker was happening in their peaceful mountain community. Alex was now sitting cross-legged on the floor with Luna's head in his lap. The dog was finally relaxing, her breathing deep and even. But David noticed something that made his blood run cold. Under Luna's matted fur, partially hidden by dried mud and scratches, was a small shaved patch of skin near her neck. In the center of the patch was a faint mark that looked like it had been burned into her skin, a brand or tattoo of some kind. Alex, David said carefully, can you keep Luna calm while I take a closer look at something? His son nodded, continuing to stroke the dog's fur, while humming softly under his breath. The humming seemed to relax Luna even more, and David was able to gently part the fur around the shaved patch. What he saw made his hands shake. The mark wasn't random, it was a number. The number 47 had been burned into Luna's skin with something hot enough to leave a permanent scar. Below the number was a smaller symbol that looked like an arrow or triangle, but that wasn't the worst part. Around Luna's neck, hidden under her thick fur, was a thin line where a collar had been cut away. The line was recent, probably within the last day or two, and it looked like it had been done with something sharp enough to cut through heavy material in one stroke. David sat back on his heels, his mind reeling. Someone had branded Luna like livestock. Someone had kept her prisoner long enough for a collar to leave a permanent mark. And then someone had tried to kill her by throwing her off a cliff. But she had survived. Somehow, impossibly, she had survived and ended up calling his son's name in the mist. Dad? Alex's voice was small and worried. What's wrong? You look scared. David forced himself to smile, though his heart was pounding. I'm just tired, buddy. It's been a long day. But Alex wasn't fooled. At 5 years old, he was already too good at reading his father's moods, a skill he had developed after his mother's death when he needed to know if Dad was having a bad day. Someone hurt her on purpose, didn't they? Alex said, his hand never stopping its gentle motion on Luna's head. That's why she was so scared when we found her. David couldn't lie to his son. They had been through too much together, and Alex deserved the truth, even if it was frightening. Yes, David said quietly. Someone hurt her, but she's safe now. We're going to take care of her. Luna opened her eyes at the sound of their voices and looked directly at David. For a moment, he could have sworn he saw intelligence in those dark eyes. Not just animal instinct, but actual understanding. As if she knew exactly what they were talking about and was trying to communicate something important. She wants to tell us something, Alex said, echoing David's thoughts, but she can't talk like people do. What do you think she wants to tell us? Alex was quiet for a long moment, studying Luna's face with the serious concentration only children can manage. I think she wants to show us where she came from. I think she knows who hurt her, and she wants us to stop them from hurting other dogs. The words sent a chill through David's body. It was a crazy idea. Dogs didn't seek justice or plan revenge. But looking at Luna, at the way she watched them both with such focused attention, he wasn't entirely sure his son was wrong. That night, David made a bed for Luna out of old blankets near the fireplace. Alex wanted her to sleep in his room, but David wasn't ready for that yet. He still didn't know enough about where Luna had come from, or what she might be capable of. But Luna had other ideas. Around midnight, David woke to the sound of soft footsteps in the hallway. He grabbed the baseball bat he kept beside his bed and crept toward Alex's room, his heart hammering in his chest. The door was slightly open, and through the crack, David could see Luna lying on the floor beside Alex's bed. The boy was sound asleep, one arm hanging over the edge of the mattress with his fingers tangled in Luna's fur. The dog was wide awake, her head up and her ears alert, watching the window and the door like a guard. David started to call Luna back to the living room, but something stopped him. The dog looked at him with those intelligent eyes and made a soft sound that was almost like a whisper. Then she looked at Alex, then back at David, and David understood. Luna wasn't just seeking comfort, she was protecting Alex. She had positioned herself where she could watch both the window and the door, and she clearly had no intention of leaving the boy's side. David lowered the baseball bat and whispered, "Okay, girl, you can stay, but if anything happens, you wake me up immediately." Luna's tail thumped once against the floor, and David could have sworn she nodded. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, with a thick fog that reminded David uncomfortably of the night before. Alex woke up excited to find Luna still beside his bed, and the dog seemed more relaxed and alert after a night of sleep. But something was bothering Luna. She kept going to the front door and whining softly, then looking back at Alex and David as if she wanted them to follow her. "I think she needs to go outside," Alex said, pulling on his shoes. David clipped Luna to a leash they had bought years ago for a neighbor's dog they had occasionally watched. But as soon as they stepped outside, Luna began pulling toward the road, not away from the house, but back toward Ocean View Cliff. "No," David said firmly, pulling back on the leash. "We're not going back there." But Luna was insistent. She sat down in the driveway and refused to move, looking back and forth between David and the direction of the cliff. Her message was clear. There was something at the cliff that she needed to show them. Alex tugged on his father's sleeve. Maybe she left something there, or maybe there's evidence that could help catch the bad people who hurt her. David looked down at his son's earnest face and sighed. The boy was probably right. If someone had tried to kill Luna at the cliff, there might be clues left behind that could help identify them. And if Luna was trying to lead them to evidence, maybe she was smarter than any of them had realized. "Okay," David said reluctantly, "but we stay together, we don't get close to the edge, and if I say we leave immediately." The drive back to Ocean View Cliff felt different in the daylight. The fog was still thick, but it wasn't the menacing wall of gray it had been the night before. Other cars were on the road, tourists heading to the scenic overlook, locals going about their morning routines. It felt safer, more normal, but Luna became increasingly agitated as they got closer to the cliff. By the time David parked the truck, she was panting and whining, her eyes darting everywhere as if she expected an attack. "Easy, girl," Alex said, stroking her head. "We're here to help. Show us what you want us to see." Luna led them away from the main overlook area toward a section of the cliff that was rarely visited by tourists. The ground here was rougher, with scrub brush and loose rocks that made walking difficult. David kept a tight grip on Alex's hand as they followed Luna through the uneven terrain. About 50 yards from where they had rescued Luna the night before, she stopped at a cluster of large boulders and began sniffing frantically at the ground. Her tail was rigid, and the fur on her back was standing up. "What is it, Luna?" Alex knelt down beside the dog and began looking around the rocks. That's when David saw it. Wedged between two of the boulders was a torn piece of fabric, black nylon, that looked like it had been ripped from a jacket or bag. But it wasn't old. The edges were still sharp and clean, as if it had been torn recently. "Don't touch it," David warned Alex. That could be evidence, but Alex was already reaching for something else he had spotted. Hidden in the shadow of the largest boulder was a metal object about the size of a TV remote. When Alex picked it up, David could see that it was some kind of electronic device with several buttons and a short antenna. "It's broken," Alex said, turning the device over in his hands. "Look, some of the pieces snapped off." David took the device and examined it more closely. Two of the buttons had broken off completely, and there were scratches along one side, as if it had been scraped against rocks. But he could still make out what it was designed to do. On the remaining buttons were symbols: a lightning bolt, a sound wave, and what looked like a dog, a silhouette. "It's a shock collar remote," David said, his voice tight with anger. "Someone was using this to hurt Luna." Alex's face went pale. "They could hurt her from far away?" "Not anymore," David said, showing Alex the broken components. "This must have been damaged when Luna fell. That's probably how she got free." But Luna wasn't finished showing them things. She had moved away from the boulders and was now sniffing around a patch of disturbed earth near a scraggly bush. When David and Alex joined her, they found something that made David's stomach turn. Partially buried in the soft dirt was a canvas duffel bag. The bag had been there for a while, long enough for rain to soak through the fabric and for dirt to partially cover it. But when David carefully pulled it free and unzipped it, the contents made everything horribly clear. Inside the bag were training manuals with titles like Aggressive Guard Dog Conditioning and Behavioral Modification Through Pain Response. There were also numbered metal tags on a chain, each tag bearing a number between 35 and 55. Luna's number, 47, was missing from the sequence. But the most disturbing items were at the bottom of the bag. Photographs of German shepherds, each one wearing a numbered collar that matched the tags. David counted 15 different dogs in the photos, but he recognized only one, Luna. In the photograph, she looked different, thinner, with a wild look in her eyes that spoke of fear and pain. She was wearing a heavy metal collar with the number 47 clearly visible, and she was standing in what looked like a concrete cell or kennel. "They had a lot of dogs," Alex said quietly, looking at the photos over David's shoulder. "Where are all the others?" David didn't answer, but his mind was racing. 15 dogs, numbered tags, training manuals focused on pain and aggression. This wasn't just theft, it was something much more organized and much more sinister. Luna whined and pawed at David's leg, then looked toward the road. Following her gaze, David saw something that made his blood freeze. Across the narrow road, barely visible through the fog, a dark van was parked in a turnout. The van's engine wasn't running, but David could see a figure in the driver's seat. As soon as the person realized they had been spotted, the van's engine started and it pulled away quickly, disappearing into the fog. "Did you see that license plate?" David asked Alex, but his son shook his head. "It was too foggy, but Luna saw it too. Look." Luna was standing rigid, staring in the direction the van had gone. The fur on her back was standing up, and a low growl was rumbling in her chest. "She knows that van," Alex said with certainty. "That's how they took her." David quickly stuffed the training manuals and photos back into the duffel bag. They needed to get this evidence to the police immediately, and they needed to get away from the cliff before the van came back. But as they hurried back toward their truck, David couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The fog seemed to hide moving shadows, and every sound made him jump. Luna was clearly on edge too, constantly looking back over her shoulder and positioning herself between Alex and any potential threat. When they reached the truck, David was relieved to see that the parking area was no longer empty. A family with small children was setting up a picnic at one of the tables, and an elderly couple was taking photographs of the view. The presence of other people made David feel slightly safer, but as he started the truck's engine, Luna began barking frantically. She was looking out the back window, her body pressed against the glass. David turned to see what had alarmed her, and his heart nearly stopped. The dark van was back, parked at the far end of the parking area. This time David could see two figures in the front seats, and they were both looking directly at his truck. "Dad," Alex said, his voice very small, "I think we're in trouble." David's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. The dark van sat at the far end of the parking lot like a predator waiting to strike. Through the fog, he could make out two shadowy figures in the front seats, both turned toward their truck. "Put your seatbelt on," David said quietly, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. "We're leaving right now." He shifted the truck into reverse, but before he could back out of the parking space, his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but something made him answer it. "Hello?" David said, his voice cautious. "You have something that belongs to us." The voice on the other end was calm, almost friendly, but there was something underneath it that made David's skin crawl. "We'd like it back." David looked at Luna, who was still barking at the van. The dog's hackles were raised, and she was showing her teeth, behavior David hadn't seen from her before. "I don't know what you're talking about," David said, though his heart was pounding. The man on the phone chuckled softly. "German Shepherd, female, approximately 18 months old, answers to the designation 47. You picked her up last night near Ocean View Cliff." David's blood ran cold. Not only did these people know he had Luna, they knew exactly where and when he had found her. They had been watching. "I found an injured animal and helped it," David said carefully. "If you're the owner, you can contact animal control and file a claim." "Oh, we're not the owners," the voice said. and David could hear the smile in it. "We're the manufacturers, and our product was scheduled for disposal last night. Your interference has created complications." The word disposal hit David like a physical blow. These people weren't just dog thieves, they were killers who thought of living animals as products to be thrown away when they were no longer useful. "You're insane," David said. "We're businessmen," the voice corrected, "and we have a reputation to maintain. Our clients pay good money for properly trained security animals. When a product fails to meet specifications, it must be eliminated. We can't have defective merchandise reflecting poorly on our operation." "Alex," David whispered to his son while keeping the phone pressed to his ear, "buckle your seatbelt and hold on to Luna." Alex's eyes were wide with fear, but he did as his father asked. Luna had stopped barking and was now pressed against Alex's side, her body tense and ready. "Here's what's going to happen," the voice on the phone continued. "You're going to drive to the address I'm about to give you. You're going to bring 47 with you, and you're going to forget this entire incident ever happened." "And if I don't?" David asked, though he was already backing the truck out of the parking space. "Well, that would be unfortunate, especially for your son. 5-year-old Alex, isn't it? Such a sweet boy. It would be terrible if something happened to him because his father made poor choices." David's vision went red with rage. These monsters knew his son's name. They had been watching his family, learning their routines, gathering information. The threat was crystal clear. "You stay away from my son," David growled into the phone. "That's entirely up to you," the voice said pleasantly. "The address is 1247 Industrial Creek Road. You have 1 hour. Oh, and don't even think about calling the police. We have people everywhere, and we'll know if you make that mistake." The line went dead. David's hands were shaking as he put the phone down. In the rearview mirror, he could see the dark van pulling out of the parking lot behind them. They weren't even trying to hide the fact that they were following. "Dad, what did those people want?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. David looked at his son in the rearview mirror. Alex was hugging Luna tightly, and the dog was letting him, sensing the boy's fear. How could David explain that bad people wanted to take Luna away and hurt her? How could he tell a 5-year-old that their family was in danger because they had tried to do the right thing? "They want Luna back," David said finally, "but we're not going to let them have her." "Because they're the ones who hurt her?" "Yes. So if we give her back, they'll hurt her more." David's throat was tight. "Yes, buddy, they will." Alex was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the serious concentration that sometimes made him seem much older than 5 years old. "Then we have to stop them," Alex said finally. "We have to save the other dogs too." The simple certainty in his son's voice broke David's heart and filled him with pride at the same time. Alex was right, of course. They couldn't just run away and let these people continue hurting animals, but they also couldn't walk into a trap that would get them all killed. David made a decision. Instead of heading home or driving to the address the man had given him, he turned toward the center of town. If these people had connections everywhere, he needed to find someone he could trust absolutely. "Where are we going?" Alex asked. "To see Ranger Mike," David said. "Remember him? He helped us when we got lost on the hiking trail last summer." Ranger Mike Collins had been a friend of Alex's mother. He was honest, capable, and most importantly, he had law enforcement training and connections with both the local police and the federal agencies that handled organized crime. The ranger station was a small log building on the edge of town, surrounded by tall pine trees that provided natural camouflage. David parked behind the building, where the truck wouldn't be visible from the road, and they hurried inside with Luna. Ranger Mike was at his desk, updating trail maps on his computer. He was a big man with graying hair and kind eyes, and his face lit up when he saw Alex. "Alex, great to see you, buddy. And who's this beautiful girl?" Mike reached out to pet Luna, but the dog backed away, her body language wary. "That's Luna," Alex said. "We saved her from some very bad people, and now they want to hurt her and us." Mike's expression immediately became serious. He looked at David with questions in his eyes. "It's a long story," David said. "But Alex is right. We're in trouble, and I don't know who else to trust." Over the next 20 minutes, David told Mike everything. The rescue at the cliff, the evidence they had found, the threatening phone call, and the van that had been following them. Mike listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes or asking for clarification. When David finished, Mike was quiet for a long moment, studying the photos and training manuals they had found in the duffel bag. "This is bigger than just local crime," Mike said finally. "The level of organization, the number of animals involved, the threats against civilians. This sounds like part of a larger operation, maybe interstate trafficking." "What does that mean?" Alex asked. Mike knelt down to Alex's eye level. "It means these are very bad people who have been doing bad things for a long time. But it also means there are special police officers whose job it is to catch people like this." "Can you call them?" David asked. "I already did," Mike said, holding up his radio. "I sent a coded message while you were talking. Help is on the way, but in the meantime, we need to keep you safe." That's when Luna suddenly stood up and began growling toward the window. The fur on her back was standing up, and her lips were pulled back to show her teeth. Mike immediately moved to the window and peered through the blinds. "There's a van parked across the street," he said quietly. "2 men inside, and they're watching this building." David felt his stomach drop. "How did they find us so fast?" "Probably followed you from the cliff," Mike said. He was already moving, pulling a rifle from a locked cabinet and checking to make sure it was loaded. "Or they have more resources than we thought." Alex looked terrified, but Luna moved to stand between the boy and the window, positioning herself as a shield. The dog's protective instincts were remarkable. Even in her own fear, her first priority was keeping Alex safe. "What do we do now?" David asked. Mike was talking quietly into his radio, using codes David didn't understand. When he finished, he turned back to them with a grim expression. "Federal agents are 20 minutes out," he said. "Local police are 15 minutes, but that van isn't waiting. Look." Through the window, David could see one of the men getting out of the van. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark jacket and carrying what looked like a small black bag. Even from a distance, there was something menacing about the way he moved. "Back exit," Mike said, grabbing his keys and radio. "We're getting you out of here right now." They slipped out the rear door of the ranger station and into the thick pine forest behind it. Mike led them along a narrow trail that wound through the trees, moving quickly but quietly. Luna stayed close to Alex, her senses alert for any sign of danger. About half a mile into the forest, Mike stopped at a small cabin that David had never seen before. It was well hidden among the trees, painted in camouflage colors that made it almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. "Safe house," Mike explained, unlocking the door. "Used for witness protection and emergency situations. You'll be secure here until the feds arrive." Inside, the cabin was spartanly furnished, but comfortable. There were beds, a small kitchen, and most importantly, multiple exits and windows that provided good views of the surrounding forest. Mike immediately got on his radio and reported their new location to the incoming agents. While he was talking, David noticed that Luna had become restless again. She was pacing near the front window, whining softly. "What's wrong, girl?" Alex asked, going to stroke her head. Luna looked at Alex, then at the window, then back at Alex. Her message was clear. There was something outside that worried her. David joined them at the window and scanned the forest. At first, he saw nothing unusual, but then, about 100 yards away, he caught a glimpse of movement through the trees. Someone in dark clothing was moving carefully through the forest, trying to stay hidden. "Mike," David said quietly, "we've got company." Mike finished his radio call and joined them at the window. His face went dark when he saw the figure in the trees. "They're good," he admitted. "I didn't think they could track us through the forest this quickly." "How many of them are there?" David asked. "Unknown, but we're about to find out." Mike checked his rifle again and moved to a different window. "I can see at least 2 more on the other side of the cabin. They're surrounding us." Alex was beginning to panic, his breathing becoming fast and shallow. Luna immediately noticed and pressed against his side, offering comfort and reassurance. "It's okay, buddy," David said, kneeling beside his son. "Ranger Mike knows what he's doing, and help is coming." But even as he said the words, David wondered if help would arrive in time. These people had found them twice now, despite their precautions. They seemed to have resources and connections that defied explanation. Mike's radio crackled to life. "Ranger Collins, this is Agent Martinez with the FBI. We're 10 minutes from your location. What's your status?" "Surrounded by unknown number of hostiles," Mike replied. At least 3, possibly more. They're armed and organized. Copy that. Can you hold your position until we arrive? We'll have to, Mike said. No choice. That's when they heard the sound that changed everything. A voice calling from the forest, amplified by some kind of electronic device. We know you're in there. Send out 47 and the boy, and nobody else gets hurt. David's blood turned to ice. They weren't just after Luna anymore. They wanted Alex too. Why do they want me? Alex asked, his voice small and frightened. David didn't know how to answer that question, but looking at Luna, who was now standing at rigid attention near the door, he began to understand. These people didn't just train dogs for security work. They trained them to bond with specific handlers, to respond to specific people. And somehow, Luna had bonded with Alex. That made Alex valuable to them, not as a person, but as a tool to control Luna. The voice from the forest came again. You have 60 seconds to comply. If you don't send them out, we're coming in. Mike positioned himself at the front window with his rifle ready. David, take Alex and Luna to the back bedroom, barricade the door, and don't come out no matter what you hear. But Luna had other ideas. Instead of following David and Alex to the back room, she moved to the front door and began scratching at it. Her body language was tense but determined. She wants to go out there, Alex said with sudden understanding. She wants to protect us by facing them herself. No, David said firmly. Luna, come here. But Luna looked at Alex with those intelligent eyes, and David could have sworn she was trying to communicate something specific. The dog moved to where Alex was standing and gently took the boy's sleeve in her teeth, tugging him toward the door. She's not trying to give herself up, Alex said, his fear replaced by sudden certainty. She's trying to tell us something. She has a plan. Before David could stop him, Alex moved to the front window and looked out at the forest. Luna joined him, and together they studied the positions of the men who were surrounding the cabin. Dad, Alex said quietly, Luna knows these people. She knows how they think and how they move. She was trained by them, remember? She knows their weaknesses. David looked at his 5-year-old son and the German Shepherd standing beside him, and he realized that Alex was right. Luna wasn't just a victim of these people. She was a graduate of their training program. She knew their methods, their equipment, and their tactics, and now she was going to use that knowledge against them. The voice from the forest came again, closer this time. 30 seconds. Mike looked at David. Whatever you're thinking, decide fast. David looked at Luna, who was watching him with those remarkable eyes. The dog's message was clear. Trust me. Okay, girl, David whispered. Show us what you've got in mind. Luna immediately moved to the front door and began a low, mournful howling that echoed through the forest. It was a sound David had never heard her make before. Not quite a howl, not quite a bark, but something that seemed designed to carry over long distances. From the forest came answering sounds, not from the men who were surrounding them, but from other dogs. Multiple dogs, all howling in response to Luna's call. Alex's eyes went wide. The other dogs, the ones in the pictures, they're here. Through the windows, David could see movement in the forest that had nothing to do with the men in dark clothes. Shapes were moving through the trees, low, fast, and silent. The stolen German Shepherds were still alive, and Luna's call had awakened something in them. The voice from the forest came again, but this time it sounded uncertain. What the hell was that? Luna's howl came again, and this time the response was even stronger. David could hear multiple dogs moving through the forest, and their handlers were clearly losing control of the situation. They don't know what's happening, Mike said with amazement. The dogs are responding to Luna instead of their handlers. Suddenly, shouts erupted from the forest. Not commands or threats, but sounds of panic and confusion. Through the trees, David could see men running, chased by dark shapes that moved like shadows. Luna had done something remarkable. She had turned the criminals' own weapons against them. The sound of helicopters filled the air, and through the windows, David could see federal agents rappelling from aircraft into the forest. The criminals, already panicked by their dog's rebellion, were surrounded before they could regroup. Within minutes, it was over. FBI agents were escorting handcuffed men out of the forest, while animal control officers worked to safely capture the stolen German Shepherds. Agent Martinez, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, knocked on the cabin door. It's safe to come out now. As they emerged from the cabin, David counted 7 arrested men and 12 rescued dogs. The dogs were thin and showing signs of abuse, but they were alive and would recover. Luna walked among the other German shepherds like a general, inspecting. Troops. Each dog she approached seemed to calm down, and David realized that her howling hadn't just been a distraction. It had been a form of communication, a way of telling the other dogs that help had arrived and they didn't have to be afraid anymore. "How did you know she could do that?" Agent Martinez asked David. "I didn't," David admitted. "My son figured it out." Agent Martinez looked at Alex with new respect. "Smart kid. That was the breakthrough we needed to locate their training facility. We've been looking for these people for months." As the federal agents finished their work, David felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. It had been less than 24 hours since they first found Luna at the cliff, but it felt like a lifetime. Alex was sitting on the ground with Luna, both of them surrounded by several of the other rescued dogs. The boy was talking to them in a soft voice, and the animals seemed drawn to his calm presence. "They like him," Agent Martinez observed. "Dogs have good instincts about people." "Luna called his name," David said. "Before we ever met her, she somehow knew who he was." Agent Martinez raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual. We'll want to investigate that further." But looking at his son and the dog who had chosen to protect him, David wasn't sure the explanation mattered. Some connections couldn't be explained by logic or science. Sometimes people and animals found each other exactly when they needed to, and that was miracle enough. 3 days later, David sat in a sterile FBI conference room, staring at photographs spread across a metal table. Agent Martinez sat across from him, her expression grim as she explained what they had discovered during their investigation of the dog trafficking ring. "We raided their main facility yesterday," she said, pointing to aerial photos of a compound hidden deep in the mountains. "What we found was worse than we imagined." The photos showed rows of concrete kennels, training equipment designed to inflict pain, and medical facilities where the dogs had been subjected to various procedures. David's stomach turned as he looked at the images. "They weren't just stealing dogs," Agent Martinez continued. "They were creating what they called custom security assets. Dogs trained to bond with specific handlers, programmed to respond only to certain people, and conditioned to be completely loyal, even under extreme circumstances." "That's why Luna knew Alex's name," David said, understanding beginning to dawn. "Exactly. They had been watching your family for weeks, gathering information. Luna was being trained specifically to bond with Alex. The plan was to steal her back after she had formed an attachment to your son, then use that bond to control both of them." David felt sick. "They were going to kidnap my son?" "Eventually, yes. Children who have bonded with their specially trained dogs become valuable assets in the criminal underworld. The dogs will do anything to protect the child, which makes both the dog and the child useful for various illegal activities." David pushed the photos away, unable to look at them anymore. "What about the other dogs, the ones we rescued?" "They're being rehabilitated at a federal facility. Most of them will eventually be adopted by families who understand their special needs. But Luna..." Agent Martinez paused. "Luna is different." "What do you mean?" "She wasn't just being trained to bond with Alex. She was their prototype, their most advanced subject. The procedures they performed on her, the conditioning she endured, it changed her in ways we're still trying to understand." David thought about Luna's uncanny intelligence, her ability to communicate with other dogs, the way she seemed to understand human speech far beyond what should be possible for any animal. "Are you saying they experimented on her?" "We found surgical records," Agent Martinez said quietly. "Nothing that would hurt her physically, but they implanted a small device near her brainstem. It was designed to enhance her cognitive abilities and strengthen her emotional responses." David's hands clenched into fists. "They turned her into some kind of living weapon. That was the plan. But here's the thing. The device doesn't work the way they intended. Instead of making her more controllable, it seems to have made her more independent, more capable of making her own choices. And she chose your family." Agent Martinez leaned forward across the table. "David, we need to ask you to help us with something. We caught most of the people involved in this operation, but we didn't get their leader. The man who created this whole program is still out there, and he wants Luna back." "Who is he?" "Dr. Marcus Kane. He's a former military researcher who was kicked out of the army for conducting unauthorized experiments on animals. He's been running this trafficking operation for at least 5 years, and Luna represents years of his research. Agent Martinez pulled out another photograph. This one showed a man in his 50s with graying hair and cold eyes. Even in the picture, there was something unsettling about his expression. Kane won't give up, she continued. Luna is too valuable to him. And now that we've destroyed his operation, she's the only proof left of his work. He'll come for her, and when he does, we want to be ready. David stared at the photograph of Dr. Kane. What are you asking me to do? We want you to help us set a trap. We'll put out word that Luna is going to be at a specific location, somewhere public but controllable. When Kane shows up to reclaim her, we'll be waiting. You want to use my son and Luna as bait. We want to end this, Agent Martinez said firmly. Kane has resources we haven't identified yet. He has people working for him that we haven't caught. As long as he's free, your family will never be safe. David was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Alex and Luna at home. In the 3 days since the rescue, they had become inseparable. Luna slept in Alex's room every night, and the boy had started talking to the dog as if she were a person. It was beautiful to watch, but it also made David realize how much they both had to lose. What did you have in mind? David asked finally. There's a public dog show next weekend at the county fairgrounds. Hundreds of people, multiple exits, easy for us to control the environment. We'll announce that Luna is going to be there as a rescued dog looking for adoption. Kane won't be able to resist. And if something goes wrong, if Kane gets to Alex or Luna before you can stop him, Agent Martinez met his eyes. We won't let that happen, but David, if we don't take this chance, Kane will eventually find another way to get to them. This gives us the advantage of choosing the time and place. That evening, David sat on Alex's bed while his son did homework at his small desk. Luna was lying on the floor nearby, but her ears were alert and her eyes tracked every movement in the house. Even relaxed, she never completely let her guard down. Dad, Alex said without looking up from his math worksheet, Luna's worried about something. David looked at the dog, who appeared calm. How can you tell? She keeps checking the windows and doors, and last night she growled in her sleep like she was having a bad dream. David wasn't surprised that Alex had noticed. The boy had always been perceptive, but his connection with Luna seemed to have heightened his awareness of things around him. Alex, how would you feel about taking Luna to a dog show this weekend? Alex looked up from his homework, his eyes bright with interest. Really? Would there be other dogs there? Lots of them, and lots of people who love dogs. Luna might meet some families who could give homes to her friends from the forest. Alex considered this for a moment. But Luna's staying with us, right? She's not going to live with another family? David smiled. They had never actually discussed keeping Luna permanently, but it had become an unspoken assumption. The dog was clearly part of their family now. Luna stays with us, David confirmed, but her friends need families too. Okay, Alex said. I think Luna would like that. She worries about the other dogs. That night, David called Agent Martinez and told her they would help with the plan. She promised that Alex would never be in real danger, that there would be agents positioned throughout the fairgrounds, and that Kane would be arrested the moment he showed himself. But as David lay in bed listening to Luna's soft breathing from Alex's room, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something dangerous. Kane wasn't just a criminal. He was a man who had spent years studying how to manipulate and control living beings. What if he had planned for this kind of trap? The dog show was scheduled for Saturday morning. On Friday night, Dr. Maya Singh stopped by to check on Luna one more time before the event. She had been monitoring the dog's health since the rescue, and she wanted to make sure the stress of recent events hadn't caused any problems. She's remarkable, Maya said, running her hands gently over Luna's body while the dog stood patiently on the kitchen table. Her muscle tone is excellent, her reflexes are sharp, and her coat is already starting to look healthier. What about the device they implanted? David asked. Maya's expression became more serious. I've been in contact with the FBI's veterinary specialists about that. The device is very small and deeply embedded. Removing it would require major surgery, and there's no guarantee Luna would survive the procedure. But it's affecting her behavior? Possibly. But David, I'm not sure that's a bad thing. Luna's cognitive abilities are far beyond what we normally see in dogs. She's essentially functioning at the level of a very intelligent child. That device may have given her capabilities that could help her protect herself and Alex. Alex, who had been listening quietly from the doorway, came into the kitchen. "Luna's smart because she needs to be smart," he said matter-of-factly. "Bad people made her that way, but now she uses it to help good people." Maya smiled at Alex's simple wisdom. "I think you're exactly right." Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. The county fairgrounds were already bustling with activity by the time David, Alex, and Luna arrived. Hundreds of people were setting up booths, grooming dogs, and preparing for the various competitions and exhibitions. Agent Martinez met them at the entrance, dressed in civilian clothes and carrying a small bag that David assumed contained surveillance equipment. "We have agents positioned throughout the grounds," she said quietly while pretending to admire Luna. "Snipers on the rooftops, plainclothes officers mingling with the crowd, and a tactical team standing by in unmarked vehicles." "What about Alex?" David asked. "He'll be with you at all times, and you'll both be wearing tracking devices. If anything goes wrong, we can find you instantly." Alex was too excited about the dog show to notice the serious conversation happening above his head. He was watching the other dogs with fascination, and Luna seemed equally interested in the variety of breeds and activities around them. They registered at the Rescued Dogs booth, where volunteers helped them set up a small display about Luna's story. The volunteers had been briefed to present Luna as a dog looking for a permanent home, though David felt guilty about the deception. Within an hour, their booth was surrounded by families interested in meeting Luna. The dog was patient and gentle with everyone, especially the children, but she never strayed far from Alex's side. "She's beautiful," said a woman with 2 young daughters. "How long has she been looking for a home?" "Just a few days," David replied, sticking to the cover story. "She was rescued from some very bad circumstances, but she's healing well." Luna seemed to understand that she was supposed to be meeting potential families, and she played the part perfectly. She sat when asked, shook hands, and even performed a few tricks that she had somehow learned during her time with the criminals. But her eyes kept scanning the crowd, and David could see the tension in her body. Around noon, Agent Martinez appeared at their booth with a worried expression. "We may have a problem," she said quietly. "Kane hasn't shown up, but we've identified several people in the crowd who have connections to his organization. It's possible he's planning something more complex than we anticipated." David felt his stomach clench. What kind of something? Before Agent Martinez could answer, Alex tugged on David's sleeve. "Dad, Luna's acting weird." David looked down at Luna, who was standing rigid with her hackles raised. She was staring at something in the crowd, and a low growl was rumbling in her chest. "What is it, girl?" David asked. Luna took a step forward, placing herself directly between Alex and whatever she was looking at. Following her gaze, David scanned the crowd until he saw a man in a baseball cap and sunglasses standing near the hot dog vendor. The man appeared to be watching their booth, and there was something familiar about his posture. "Agent Martinez," David said quietly. "Baseball cap, near the food stand." Agent Martinez casually turned to look, and her hand moved to the radio hidden under her jacket. "That's him," she said. "That's Kane." But even as she spoke, the man in the baseball cap was walking away, disappearing into the crowd with the casual confidence of someone who had gotten what he came for. "Should we follow him?" David asked. "Number." This was reconnaissance. He's studying the situation, learning our positions and capabilities. The real attack will come later. Alex was getting worried by the adults' tense conversation and Luna's aggressive posture. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "Just being careful, buddy," David said, but he was scanning the crowd for any other suspicious figures. That's when Luna did something unexpected. She began to bark, not the aggressive warning bark she had used when sensing danger, but a different sound entirely. It was rhythmic and controlled, almost like a code. From various points around the fairgrounds, other dogs began to respond. David could hear barking coming from at least a dozen different locations, and he realized that some of the other rescued German shepherds were at the dog show as part of their rehabilitation. "She's communicating with them," Alex said with wonder. "She's telling them about the bad man." Agent Martinez spoke urgently into her radio. "All units, be advised that our canine asset is indicating multiple threats. Repeat, Luna is warning about multiple threats." Within minutes, the situation became clear. Kane hadn't come alone, and he hadn't come unprepared. FBI agents began reporting suspicious individuals throughout the fairgrounds. At least 8 people who were moving in coordinated patterns and carrying equipment that could be weapons. "They're surrounding us," Agent Martinez said. "Kane is planning to take Luna and Alex right here in front of hundreds of witnesses." David's mind raced. They were trapped in the middle of a crowded public event, with nowhere to run and limited options for fighting back. But looking at Luna, who was still maintaining her protective stance over Alex, David realized they weren't defenseless. "How many of the rescued dogs are here today?" David asked Agent Martinez. 7, I think." "Why?" David looked at Alex, who was watching Luna with the intense concentration he always showed when he was trying to understand what the dog was thinking. "Alex," David said, "do you think Luna can tell the other dogs what's happening? Can she ask them to help?" Alex nodded without hesitation. "She's already doing it, Dad. Listen." The barking pattern had changed. Now it was coming from all around the fairgrounds, in a complex rhythm that sounded almost like music. Other dogs, not just the rescued German shepherds, but pets brought by families, were joining in the chorus. "What are they doing?" Agent Martinez asked. "They're organizing," Alex said with certainty. "Luna's teaching them how to help." Suddenly, chaos erupted throughout the fairgrounds. Dogs began breaking free from their handlers and running in seemingly random directions. But David could see the pattern. They were heading toward the suspicious individuals that Kane had positioned around the area. A man near the petting zoo suddenly found himself surrounded by 3 large dogs who had somehow slipped their leashes. Another suspect by the game booths was knocked down by a border collie who appeared to be playing, but was actually preventing the man from reaching into his jacket. Kane's carefully planned operation was falling apart because Luna had turned every dog at the fairgrounds into an ally. "Now!" Agent Martinez shouted into her radio. "All units move in now!" FBI agents appeared from everywhere, moving to arrest Kane's people while they were distracted by the dogs. But Kane himself was nowhere to be seen. "Where is he?" David asked, pulling Alex closer. Luna's head snapped toward the parking lot, and she began pulling in that direction with urgent whines. She had picked up Kane's scent, and she knew where he was going. "He's heading for his escape route," Agent Martinez said, following Luna's lead. They ran through the fairgrounds toward the parking lot, Luna leading the way with Alex and David close behind. Agent Martinez spoke rapidly into her radio, coordinating with other agents to cut off possible escape routes. In the parking lot, they could see a black SUV with its engine, running. Through the windshield, David caught a glimpse of the man in the baseball cap, Dr. Kane, preparing to flee. But Luna had other plans. The dog broke free from David's grip and ran directly toward the SUV, barking with a fury that made even David step back. Kane saw her coming and gunned the engine, but Luna was faster. She leaped onto the hood of the SUV just as it started to move, her claws scratching against the metal as she tried to hold on. Kane swerved the vehicle, trying to throw Luna off, but the dog held on with determination born of months of abuse and a fierce desire to protect the family that had saved her. The SUV crashed into a parked car, its windshield spiderwebbing from the impact. Kane stumbled out of the driver's side, dazed and bleeding from a cut on his forehead. Luna jumped down from the hood and positioned herself between Kane and the path, back to the fairgrounds where Alex was waiting. Her message was clear: "You're not going anywhere near that boy." Agent Martinez and several other FBI agents surrounded Kane before he could recover from the crash. As they handcuffed him, he looked at Luna with a mixture of rage and admiration. "You don't understand what you're destroying," Kane said to Agent Martinez. "That animal represents years of research. She's the key to creating the perfect security force." "She's not your property," Agent Martinez replied. "She never was." Kane's eyes found David in the crowd of agents. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. That device in her brain. It's experimental technology worth millions. She's not just a dog anymore." "You're right," David said, walking over to stand beside Luna. "She's not just a dog, she's family." As Kane was loaded into a federal vehicle, Luna returned to Alex's side. The boy wrapped his arms around her neck, and she licked his face with gentle affection. "Is it over?" Alex asked. David looked at Agent Martinez, who was coordinating the cleanup with other agents. She caught his eye and nodded. "It's over," David confirmed. "The bad people can't hurt Luna or any of the other dogs anymore." Alex smiled and buried his face in Luna's fur. "We did it, Luna. We saved everybody. Standing in the parking lot, surrounded by FBI agents and the wreckage of Kane's escape attempt, David realized that Alex was right. They had saved everybody, not just Luna, but all the dogs that had been stolen and abused, and probably countless others who would have been victims if Kane's operation had continued. But more than that, Luna had saved them too. She had brought purpose back into their lives after the devastating loss of Alex's mother. She had given them a reason to be brave, to fight for something bigger than themselves. As they walked back toward the fairgrounds where families were still enjoying the dog show, David reflected on how much their lives had changed in just 1 week. They had started as 3 broken individuals, a grieving widower, a lonely child, and an abused animal. Now they were something new, a family forged by extraordinary circumstances and held together by love that transcended species. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. 2 weeks after Dr. Kane's arrest, David thought their story was finally over. The news crews had packed up and gone home, the FBI had finished their investigation, and life was slowly returning to normal. Alex was back in school, Luna had settled into their daily routine, and David had even started sleeping through the night again. He should have known it was too good to last. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while Alex was at school and David was working in his home office. Luna was lying nearby, but the moment the phone rang, she lifted her head with an alertness that immediately put David on edge. "Hello?" David answered. "Mr. David Parker?" The voice was professional, businesslike. "Yes. This is Rebecca Stone from Channel 7 News. We've been following your story, and we'd like to invite you and your son to appear on our morning show. The story of how a 5-year-old boy saved a dog and helped bring down a criminal organization has captured national attention." David looked at Luna, who was now standing with her ears forward. The dog's instincts about phone calls had proven reliable, and her body language suggested this wasn't a conversation he should be having. "I appreciate the interest," David said carefully, "but we're not looking for publicity. We just want to get back to our normal lives." "I understand your reluctance," Rebecca continued, "but this could be a wonderful opportunity to raise awareness about animal trafficking. Think about all the dogs that could be saved if people knew what to look for." The argument was compelling, and David found himself wavering. Maybe they did have a responsibility to use their experience to help other animals. "Let me think about it," David said. "Of course. But I should mention that we've already received interest from several major networks. Good Morning America, The Today Show, even 60 Minutes wants to do a feature story. This is going to be big whether you participate or not. Wouldn't you rather control how your story is told?" After hanging up, David sat in his office and tried to process what he had just heard. National attention was the last thing he wanted for his family. They had been through enough trauma, and Alex was finally starting to act like a normal 5-year-old again. But the reporter's words bothered him. If other networks were going to tell their story anyway, maybe he should participate to make sure the facts were accurate. When Alex came home from school, David decided to discuss it with him. They sat on the back porch while Luna played in the yard, chasing leaves that drifted down from the oak trees. "Alex, how would you feel about being on television to talk about Luna?" Alex looked up from his coloring book with interest. "On TV? Like the cartoons?" "No, like the news. Some people want to hear about how we saved Luna and how she helped catch the bad people." Alex considered this seriously, his crayon hovering over a picture of a dog that looked remarkably like Luna. "Would Luna be on TV too?" "Probably." "Would it help other dogs?" "It might." Alex nodded decisively. "Then we should do it. Luna would want to help other dogs." That evening, David called Rebecca Stone back and agreed to a brief interview. She was thrilled and immediately began making arrangements for a camera crew to come to their house the following week. But as the days passed, David began to have second thoughts. The attention was escalating beyond anything he had imagined. Their local newspaper ran a front-page story about the miracle dog of Ocean View Cliff. Social media was buzzing with posts about Alex and Luna. Strangers were driving by their house, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous German Shepherd. The night before the television interview, David found Alex in his room, unable to sleep. Luna was on the bed beside him, and both boy and dog looked anxious. "I'm scared about tomorrow," Alex admitted. "Why, buddy?" "What if I say something wrong? What if people don't believe our story?" David sat on the edge of the bed and stroked Luna's head. The dog leaned into his touch, seeking comfort. "You don't have to worry about that," David said. "Just tell the truth about what happened. That's all anyone can ask." But what if the truth sounds too crazy? It was a fair question. Even David sometimes had trouble believing everything that had happened. A dog that could communicate with other animals, coordinate rescue operations, and somehow know a child's name before they had ever met. It did sound like something from a movie rather than real life. "Then we'll let Luna show them," David said. "She's pretty good at proving herself." The next morning, the Channel 7 news crew arrived with more equipment than David had expected. Rebecca Stone turned out to be a woman in her 30s with perfectly styled hair and an intensity that made David immediately uncomfortable. "This is going to be wonderful," she said, directing her crew to set up cameras in the living room. "I want to capture the intimate bond between Alex and Luna. The viewers need to feel the emotional connection." As the crew worked, David noticed that Luna was becoming increasingly agitated. She paced around the living room, sniffing the equipment and the strangers who were handling it. Her behavior reminded him of the way she had acted when sensing danger during their encounters with Kane's people. "Is she always this restless?" Rebecca asked, watching Luna with professional interest. "No," David said. "She's usually very calm around new people." "Well, camera equipment can be intimidating for animals. Don't worry, she'll settle down once we start rolling." But Luna didn't settle down. If anything, she became more agitated as the interview began. She positioned herself between Alex and the cameras, occasionally whining or pawing at the boy's leg. "Let's start with you, Alex," Rebecca said, holding a microphone toward the 5-year-old. "Can you tell our viewers about the night you first saw Luna?" Alex began to recount the story, but he kept looking down at Luna, clearly distracted by the dog's behavior. David could see that his son was picking up on Luna's anxiety, and it was affecting his ability to concentrate. "It was raining," Alex said hesitantly, "and we saw her falling off the cliff. She was calling my name, but I didn't know how she knew me." "That's fascinating," Rebecca said, leaning forward. "How do you think Luna knew your name?" "I don't know," Alex said, his voice getting smaller. "She just did." Luna suddenly stood up and moved to the window, her ears pricked forward. She began to growl low in her throat, and David could see the fur on her back starting to rise. "Luna, what's wrong?" Alex asked, abandoning the interview to go to his dog. Rebecca looked annoyed by the interruption. "Can we get the dog to settle down?" This is really disrupting the flow of the interview. But David was more concerned about Luna's behavior than the interview. The dog was now staring fixedly out the front window, and her growling was becoming more intense. "I think we should take a break," David said, moving to look out the window. What he saw made his blood run cold. Across the street, a man with a camera was taking pictures of their house. But this wasn't another news crew. The man was trying to stay hidden behind a parked car, and his telephoto lens was focused on the living room window. "Alex, get away from the window," David said urgently. Rebecca Stone looked confused. "What's going on?" "There's someone outside taking pictures," David said, pulling out his phone to call Agent Martinez. "Oh, that's probably just a freelance photographer," Rebecca said dismissively. "These human interest stories always attract that kind of attention." But Luna's reaction suggested this was more than just a curious photographer. The dog was now barking with the same intensity she had shown when sensing danger from Kane's people. Agent Martinez answered on the second ring. "David, what's wrong?" "There's a photographer outside our house, and Luna is acting like we're in danger." "Get away from the windows and stay inside," Agent Martinez said immediately. "We'll have someone there in 5 minutes." David turned to Rebecca and her crew. "I need everyone to move to the back of the house right now." "That's ridiculous," Rebecca protested. "We're in the middle of an interview." "The interview is over," David said firmly, scooping Alex into his arms. Luna immediately flanked them as they moved toward the kitchen. That's when the shooting started. The first shots shattered the living room window where they had been sitting just moments before. Glass exploded across the furniture, and the camera crew dove for cover behind their equipment. Rebecca Stone screamed and dropped her microphone. "What's happening?" "Someone's trying to kill us," David said, pulling Alex down behind the kitchen island. Luna pressed herself against the boy, her body creating a shield between Alex and the direction of the gunfire. More shots rang out, these coming from a different angle. David realized there were at least 2 shooters positioned around their house. "Dad, I'm scared," Alex whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I know, buddy, but Luna's going to protect us, and help is coming." As if she understood his words, Luna began to bark in the distinctive pattern David had learned to recognize as her way of communicating with other dogs. Within moments, dogs throughout the neighborhood began responding. Through the chaos of gunfire and breaking glass, David could hear the sounds of multiple dogs barking, snarling, and causing general mayhem outside. The shooters were being harassed by what sounded like half the neighborhood's pet population. "How is she doing that?" Rebecca gasped from where she was crouched behind an overturned table. "She's calling for help," Alex said with simple certainty. The gunfire stopped abruptly, replaced by shouting, and the sound of cars speeding away. Agent Martinez's voice came through David's phone, which he had dropped during the chaos. "David! David! Are you there?" David grabbed the phone. "We're okay. The shooting stopped. We've got units surrounding your house. Stay where you are until we give the all clear." 20 minutes later, FBI agents escorted David, Alex, and Luna out of their damaged house. The living room was destroyed, with bullet holes in the walls and shattered glass covering everything. If they had still been giving the interview when the shooting started, they would all be dead. Agent Martinez met them at the end of the driveway, her face grim. "We found shell casings from 2 different positions," she said, "professional shooters with high-powered rifles. This was a coordinated assassination attempt." "But Kane is in prison," David said. "Who would want to kill us now?" "Kane had partners we haven't identified yet. People who have a lot to lose if Luna's story continues to get national attention." David looked at the news van, which had been damaged by stray bullets. Rebecca Stone and her crew were giving statements to FBI agents, clearly shaken by how close they had come to being killed. "The television interview," David said, understanding beginning to dawn. "Someone didn't want us to tell our story on national TV." "Exactly. Luna's abilities, the details about the trafficking operation, the technology that was used on her. There are people who want that information buried." Alex was clinging to Luna, both of them trembling from the aftermath of violence. "Are the bad people going to keep trying to hurt us?" Alex asked. Agent Martinez knelt down to Alex's eye level. "We're going to make sure you're safe," she promised. "But it might mean some big changes for your family." Over the next few hours, as FBI agents processed the crime scene and federal marshals discussed security options, David began to understand what those changes might mean. Their house was compromised. Their identities were known to dangerous people. Their normal life was over. "We're recommending witness protection," Agent Martinez said as they sat in an FBI field office later that evening. New identities, new location, new life. David felt like the world was spinning out of control. For how long? Until we can guarantee your safety. Could be months, could be years. Alex looked up from where he was sitting on the floor with Luna. "Does Luna get a new name too?" Agent Martinez smiled sadly. "Luna can keep her name, but you and your dad will need to be someone else for a while." "What about school? What about our house? What about Dad's work?" David had been wondering the same things. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that everything familiar in his life has to disappear because they tried to do the right thing? "We'll figure it out," David said, though he had no idea how. That night, they stayed in a safe house while FBI agents worked to identify the shooters and assess the ongoing threat. David lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Alex's soft breathing from the next bed and Luna's gentle snoring from the floor. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number, but the content made his blood freeze. "You should have minded your own business. Next time, we won't miss." David showed the message to Agent Martinez the next morning. She immediately had the phone traced and assigned additional security to their detail. "This confirms what we suspected," she said. "There's still an active threat against your family. What's our next step? We have 2 options. Option 1 is witness protection, complete new identities, and relocation to somewhere far from here. Option 2 is we use you as bait again, but this time we make sure we get everyone involved in this organization." David almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "You want us to be bait again, after yesterday? I know how it sounds, but David, these people aren't going to stop. They've invested too much in this technology and lost too much money when we shut down their operation. As long as you and Luna are out there, you're a threat to them. And if we go into witness protection, they'll probably keep looking for you, and eventually they might find you. Witness protection isn't perfect. David looked through the window of the safe house to where Alex was playing in the secured yard with Luna. The boy was throwing a tennis ball, and the dog was bringing it back with the kind of simple joy that had been rare in both their lives lately. What would the bait operation involve? Agent Martinez pulled out a folder with photographs and documents. We leak information that you're going to testify before a congressional committee about the technology used on Luna. We set up a fake hearing in Washington with heavy security that's designed to look vulnerable. When they make their move, we'll be ready. And if they're smarter than you think, if they realize it's a trap, then we'll have learned something about their capabilities, and we'll try a different approach. David was quiet for a long moment, watching Alex and Luna play. The boy was laughing as Luna performed tricks she had somehow learned during her time with the criminals. Despite everything they had been through, Alex still found joy in simple moments with his dog. "What do you think Luna would want us to do?" David asked. Agent Martinez followed his gaze to the yard. "I think Luna would want to end this threat so Alex can grow up safe and happy." That afternoon, David made his decision. They would help with one more operation, but with conditions. Alex would be kept far away from any danger, with round-the-clock protection. Luna would be with them, but only because her abilities were crucial to the plan's success. And if anything went wrong, the FBI would immediately implement witness protection for all of them. "You're sure about this?" Agent Martinez asked. David looked at his son, who was now teaching Luna to shake hands with different paws. "I'm sure," he said, "but this is the last time. After this, we disappear forever, if that's what it takes to keep them safe." Agent Martinez nodded. "Understood. Let's end this once and for all." As they began planning for what David hoped would be their final confrontation with the people who wanted to destroy their family, he couldn't help but think about how much their lives had changed since that foggy night at Ocean View Cliff. A week ago, they had been ordinary people living a quiet life. Now they were the targets of an international criminal organization, protected by federal agents and planning operations that sounded like something from an action movie. But looking at Alex and Luna, David realized that some things hadn't changed at all. They were still a family, they still loved each other, and they would still do whatever it took to protect one another. The rest was just details. The congressional hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday in Washington, D.C. David spent the week in a secure facility going over his testimony with FBI lawyers, while Alex stayed at a different safe house with Luna and a team of federal marshals. The separation was agonizing for all of them, but Agent Martinez insisted it was necessary for the operation to work. "The people we're trying to catch have to believe this hearing is real," she explained during one of their planning sessions. "If they suspect it's a trap, they won't take the bait." David studied the fake documents that had been prepared for the hearing. Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, Subcommittee on Research and Technology, Hearing on Unauthorized Animal Experimentation and National Security Implications. It looked official enough to fool anyone who wasn't looking too closely. "How do we know they'll try to stop the hearing?" David asked. "Because Luna represents the only physical evidence of their technology," Agent Martinez replied. "If you testify about what was done to her, and if scientists examine her, their entire research program becomes public knowledge. They can't let that happen." "And you're sure they'll try to kill us rather than just discredit our testimony?" Agent Martinez's expression was grim. "These people tried to murder a 5-year-old boy to keep their secrets. They're not interested in half measures." The night before the hearing, David was allowed a brief video call with Alex and Luna. His son looked tired and scared, despite the efforts of the marshals to keep him entertained and comfortable. "When are you coming back, Dad?" Alex asked, his small face filling the computer screen. "Soon, buddy. Just one more day, and then we'll be together again." "Luna misses you too," Alex said, lifting the dog so she could see the camera. Luna's ears perked up at the sound of David's voice, and she whined softly. "I miss you both," David said, his throat tight with emotion. "But after tomorrow, this will all be over. We'll be safe." "Promise?" David wanted to promise, but he knew too much could go wrong. "I'll do everything I can to make sure we're safe," he said instead. Thursday morning dawned cold and gray in Washington. David was driven to the Capitol building in an armored SUV, surrounded by FBI agents posing as congressional staff members. The hearing room had been chosen specifically because it offered multiple entry and exit points, giving the agents flexibility in how to respond to different threats. As David took his seat at the witness table, he could see Agent Martinez in the gallery, dressed as a reporter. Other agents were scattered throughout the room, some posing as congressional aides, others as members of the media. The setup looked convincing, but David couldn't shake the feeling that their enemies would see through the deception. Congressman Robert Hayes, who was chairing the fake hearing, called the session to order at exactly 10 a.m. The plan was to begin David's testimony and wait for the criminals to make their move. "Mr. Parker," Congressman Hayes began, "thank you for appearing before this committee today. Can you please tell us, in your own words, about your experiences with the animal trafficking organization led by Dr. Marcus Kane?" David had rehearsed this testimony dozens of times, but sitting in the ornate hearing room with cameras rolling and dozens of people watching, the words felt different, more real, more important. "2 months ago, my son and I rescued a German Shepherd from Ocean View Cliff," David began. "We didn't know at the time that this dog had been subjected to experimental procedures designed to enhance her cognitive abilities and emotional responses." As David spoke, he noticed movement in the gallery. A man in a suit had entered the hearing room and was walking slowly along the back wall, his eyes scanning the crowd. Something about his movement pattern reminded David of the way Kane's people had positioned themselves at the dog show. Agent Martinez must have noticed the same thing because David saw her speak quietly into a concealed microphone. "The dog, who we named Luna, demonstrated abilities far beyond what we would expect from even a highly trained animal," David continued. "She could communicate with other dogs in complex ways, coordinate group activities, and seemed to understand human speech at a level that was almost supernatural." The man in the suit had stopped walking and was now standing near one of the exit doors. David could see him reaching inside his jacket, and his heart began to pound. "Furthermore," David said, speeding up his testimony, "we discovered that Luna had been branded with a number and fitted with some kind of electronic device that enhanced her natural abilities." That's when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing the hearing room in an eerie red glow. David could hear people shouting and moving in the gallery, but he couldn't tell who was an agent and who might be a threat. "Stay down!" Agent Martinez's voice cut through the chaos. David dropped to the floor behind the witness table just as the first shots rang out. But these weren't random shots. They were precise, targeted rounds aimed at specific locations throughout the room. Through the confusion, David could hear multiple voices coordinating an attack. These weren't lone gunmen. This was a full-scale assault by a professional team. "Multiple shooters!" someone shouted. "East corridor and balcony." David pressed himself against the floor as bullets shattered the wood paneling above his head. This was supposed to be a controlled situation, but it felt like they were in the middle of a war zone. "David!" Agent Martinez's voice came from somewhere to his left. "We need to get you out of here." But before David could move, something unexpected happened. The sound of barking echoed through the hearing room, not from one dog, but from many. Through the emergency lighting and gun smoke, David could see shapes moving through the room with purpose and coordination. Luna had arrived, and she hadn't come alone. Somehow, the dog had escaped from the safe house and made her way to the Capitol building. More than that, she had brought reinforcements, at least a dozen other dogs that must have been part of the original trafficking ring, now working together as a coordinated unit. The attacking gunmen suddenly found themselves surrounded by animals that had been trained for combat, but were now fighting against their former masters. The sound of gunfire was replaced by shouts of surprise and pain, as the dogs used their training to protect rather than attack innocent people. "Luna!" David called out, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Through the red emergency lighting, he could see the German Shepherd moving through the room like a general commanding troops. She would bark commands to the other dogs, who would then move to specific positions to corner or disable the attackers. One gunman tried to flee through the main entrance, but found his path blocked by 3 German Shepherds working in perfect coordination. Another attempted to reach David, but was tackled by a Belgian Malinois who seemed to appear out of nowhere. Within minutes, the assault was over. FBI agents were handcuffing 6 attackers, while the dogs sat in a perfect circle around the witness table, with Luna at their head like a protective honor guard. Agent Martinez helped David to his feet, her face a mixture of relief and amazement. "How did Luna get here?" she asked. "I don't know," David said, staring at the dog who had somehow orchestrated their rescue. "But I'm glad she did." Luna approached David and pressed against his leg, whining softly. She was unharmed, but clearly exhausted from whatever journey had brought her to the Capitol building. "Where's Alex?" David asked, sudden panic cutting through his relief. "Safe," Agent Martinez assured him. "He's still at the secure location with the marshals. Luna apparently slipped away during an exercise period and somehow made her way here." David knelt down and hugged Luna, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his chest. "How did you know we were in trouble?" he whispered. As if in answer, Luna looked toward the gallery where the other dogs were now being examined by FBI veterinarians. Each of the animals was wearing a collar with a small electronic device attached. "Tracking devices," Agent Martinez said, following David's gaze. Luna must have used the same technology that was implanted in her brain to communicate with the other dogs and coordinate their rescue mission. Dr. Maya Singh appeared at David's side, having been brought in as part of the operations medical team. "It's remarkable," she said, examining Luna with professional fascination. "She's essentially turned her enhanced cognitive abilities into a form of leadership. She's not just communicating with other dogs, she's organizing them." Over the next few hours, as FBI agents processed the crime scene and interrogated the captured attackers, the full scope of what Luna had accomplished became clear. She had somehow sensed that David was in danger, escaped from a secure federal facility, located and recruited a dozen other enhanced dogs, and led them across Washington, D.C. to mount a rescue operation. The tracking shows she traveled over 50 miles in less than 6 hours, Agent Martinez reported. She went to at least 4 different locations where the other dogs were being held for evidence, somehow freed them, and brought them here just in time to save your life. David shook his head in amazement. "She planned all of this?" "More than that," Dr. Maya said. "She executed a complex military-style operation using assets she had never worked with before. The level of strategic thinking involved is unprecedented in animal behavior." That evening, David was finally reunited with Alex at the safe house. The boy ran into his father's arms while Luna danced around them both, her tail wagging with pure joy. "I knew Luna would save you," Alex said, his face pressed against David's chest. "She told me she was going to—" David looked down at his son in surprise. "She told you?" "Not with words," Alex explained, "but I could tell. She got really quiet and focused, like she was making a plan. Then she looked at me like she was saying goodbye, and then she was gone." Agent Martinez, who had been watching the reunion, stepped forward with news that would change everything. "The attackers we captured today were the last of Kane's organization," she said. "With their arrest, we've dismantled the entire network. You're safe now, all of you." David felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he was carrying. "It's really over? It's really over. You can go home, go back to your normal lives. Luna can stay with you permanently. She's earned that, right?" Alex looked up at his father with bright eyes. "We get to keep Luna forever?" "Forever," David confirmed. But as they prepared to leave the safe house and return to their regular lives, David realized that nothing would ever be quite the same. Luna's abilities, her intelligence, and her capacity for strategic thinking made her unlike any animal that had ever existed. "What happens to the other dogs?" Alex asked as they watched the FBI load the rescued animals into transport vehicles. Agent Martinez smiled. "They're going to a special facility where they'll be studied and cared for. Scientists want to understand how the enhancement process works so they can help other animals who might have been subjected to similar experiments. Will we ever see them again?" "I hope so," Agent Martinez said. "Luna has created something remarkable. A new kind of relationship between humans and animals based on true partnership rather than just training. I think she's changed how we think about what's possible." 6 months later, David stood on the observation deck of Ocean View Cliff, watching Alex and Luna play in the meadow below. The spot where they had first met had become a special place for their family, somewhere they came to remember how extraordinary their bond really was. The cliff edge had been fitted with new safety railings after their story became public, and a small plaque had been installed near the overlook. It read, "In memory of all animals who have suffered and in celebration of the love that heals, Dr. Maya Singh had used the donations that poured in after their story went viral to establish a new wing of her veterinary clinic dedicated to treating animals who had been victims of abuse or experimentation. Luna served as a therapy dog there, helping other animals learn to trust humans again. Alex, now 6 years old, had become something of a local celebrity at his school. His classmates were fascinated by his friendship with Luna, and teachers often asked him to share their story, with younger students learning about kindness and courage. But the most remarkable change was in Luna herself. The experimental device implanted in her brain had continued to develop her cognitive abilities, and she now functioned at a level that defied classification. She could understand complex instructions, solve problems that challenged adult humans, and maintain friendships with both people and animals that lasted across time and distance. "Dad," Alex said, running up from the meadow with Luna at his side, "Luna wants to show you something." David followed them to a section of the cliff where erosion had exposed some unusual rock formations. Luna began pawing at a particular spot, and when David looked closer, he could see something metallic glinting in the stone. "What is it?" Alex asked. David carefully extracted the object from the rock. It was a small collar tag, tarnished with age, with a number that had been worn almost smooth, 001. "I think," David said slowly, "this might be from the very first dog they experimented on, the beginning of the whole program." Luna sniffed the tag and then looked out over the ocean, her expression almost melancholy. David wondered if she was thinking about all the animals who had suffered before her, or all the ones who had been saved because of her courage. "Should we bury it?" Alex asked. "Yes," David said. "I think that would be right." They found a spot near the memorial plaque and dug a small hole. As David placed the collar tag in the earth, Alex said a few words about the unknown dog who had worn it, hoping that wherever they were, they had found peace. Luna placed a paw on the small grave and made a soft sound that was part whine, part sigh. Then she looked at Alex and David with eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom and love in the world. "Come on, girl," Alex said, scratching behind her ears. "Let's go home." As they walked back toward their truck, David reflected on everything they had been through together. They had started as three broken individuals brought together by chance and trauma. Now they were a family bound by love, trust, and shared purpose. Luna had been created by people who wanted to turn her into a weapon, but she had chosen instead to become a healer. She had used her enhanced abilities not for destruction, but for protection, rescue, and bringing justice to those who couldn't fight for themselves. Alex climbed into the passenger seat while Luna settled in the back and David started the engine. As they drove away from Ocean View Cliff, he could see Luna watching the memorial plaque through the rear window until it disappeared from view. "Dad," Alex said as they turned onto the main road. "Yeah, buddy? Do you think Luna knows how special she is?" David looked in the rearview mirror at the German Shepherd who had saved their lives, rescued dozens of other animals, and brought down an international criminal organization through sheer intelligence and determination. "I think she knows she's loved," David said, "and I think that's what makes her special." Alex nodded, satisfied with this answer. Luna rested her head on his shoulder from the back seat, and all three of them settled in for the drive home. Behind them, the sun was setting over Ocean View Cliff, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was the end of one chapter of their story, but David knew it wasn't the end of their adventures together. Luna had shown them that love could triumph over cruelty, that intelligence guided by compassion could overcome any obstacle, and that families came in all shapes and sizes. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. The rest, as David had learned, was just details. If this incredible story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more amazing tales of courage, love, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in miracles today.